Hi everyone, here's the Book Chemist once again, and today I'll be reviewing The Dispossessed by Ursula Le Guin, a marvelous novel of ideas based on a concept every bit as intriguing as the idea at the heart of The Left Hand of Darkness by Le Guin, one of my favorite novels that I read in 2022. The Dispossessed is set on two twin planets orbiting one another and acting as each other's moon. On one of these two planets, Anares, lives an utopian anarchist community where people live a communal life of joint labor. They do not own anything, they share everything, and they live a life without any laws, without any centralized forms of power, without any prisons. The other planet, Urras, is a place of countries and nations and governments, a place of laws, private property, and vast inequality, very much like our world, or at least like the contemporary West. Anares is arid and poor, but peaceful, whereas Urras is rich and lush, but it is also plagued by war and injustice. And the novel follows Shevek, a genius physicist from Anares, as he travels to Urras, the first man from this planet to travel to its twin in decades, the first man from the moon, as they call him on Urras. And at the same time, the novel also tells us the story of Shevek's life, because it keeps jumping with each chapter between the novels present on Urras and Shevek's, the story of Shevek's life up to that point on Anares. I call this a novel of ideas, and the plot and characters in The Dispossessed definitely feel like a structure on which Le Guin can drape this very complex and very intriguing discussion of these two different forms of government, two different forms of community. That, however, shouldn't suggest that the novel is dry or that the plot is contrived or secondary, far from it. If anything, we get to know about these two different worlds, not so much in the vacuum of theory, but by meeting and experiencing life through the eyes, by meeting various characters from these two different planets. We get to experience firsthand what it means to live in two societies that are structured so differently from one another. This way we get to learn about the prejudice and injustice that is rampant on Urras, where the propertarian classes, the richer classes who own property, look down constantly on those they exploit, including the poor and women, and come up with all sorts of theories to justify their exploitation of these groups of people. At the same time, we also learn about the closed-mindedness and the puritanical strain on Anares, where every form of possessiveness, every possessive impulse, no matter how innocent, is constantly kept in check by society. The characterization of these two worlds reminded me a lot of the way Le Guin builds Orgorian and Karhide, the two main nations on Gethen, which is the planet where The Left Hand of Darkness is set. It is Le Guin's sheer genius that she is able to show all the achievements and all the glory that these different nations, these different worlds have built, only to remind the readers very subtly of the cost of all of these achievements. At various points in the novel, for instance, I found myself smitten with the great luxuries and the variety of artistic expression that's available on Urras, only to be swiftly reminded of the unequal world that produce these luxuries and these great achievements. Even more so, it's impossible not to root for Anares. How not to be impressed and enamored with a world where there's no injustice, there is virtually no violence, there's no oppression, no empty rhetoric, no prisons. It's a beautiful vision. And yet Le Guin is brave enough to point out the flaws even with such a utopian world. For instance, in the ways in which a world where society is sustained by the concept of neighborly consciousness, the fact that you work and you do what you do with your life because you want to meet your neighbor's expectations of what you should do. And obviously this creates very narrow patterns, very narrow paths that people are expected to follow, and people really struggle to get out of this close-minded mentality that becomes even almost a form of oppression itself. If there is one element of the novel that didn't fully convince me, I must say that it is the protagonist, the character of Shevek. I definitely disagree with Roddy Doyle, who in the introduction to my edition of the book calls Shevek one of the great characters. To me, it felt like Shevek fell quite squarely into a trope, a type of protagonist that is quite common in science fiction and fantasy, which is the chosen one, a protagonist who is just a little bit too heroic, a little bit too noble, a little bit too brave to be a believable human being. By all means, at one point in the novel especially, Shevek behaves brutally, criminally toward another character, but even that just provided a strange, monstrous foil to his heroism, rather than really rounding him out as a character. These excesses of integrity and nobility of spirit are perhaps more jarring, they feel more jarring to me, because the rest of the novel is so very clear-eyed when it comes to its insights into human nature. And truth be told, I found that many of the secondary characters in the novel felt much more real and much more human. I'm thinking here, for instance, of Bedap, this unsatisfied, idealistic young man who is even more idealistic than the utopian society that created him. Or Atro, a physicist from Uras, who is an incredibly intelligent man of science, but at the same time is also stuck in very rusty thought patterns and sees the world through a very aristocratic lens. Overall, The Dispossessed is an incredibly beautiful, extremely insightful science fiction novel and a great exercise in imagination. If you're interested in anarchism as a social possibility, in utopian fiction, or in imaginative fiction more broadly speaking, I'm sure you would find immense nourishment in this novel, which is really a gem. I'm really happy I read it after Left Hand of Darkness, and I'm very curious to read more of Le Guin's novels going forward, maybe more of the Hainish cycle to which both of these books belong. What did you think of The Dispossessed? Are you a big fan? Do you count it among Le Guin's most successful novels? And after these two, what should I read next? I really look forward to discussing the novel and Le Guin in the comment section. As always, thank you so much for watching the review, and thank you to my patrons for supporting the channel, and bye everybody.